Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music, and I'm here with 6 great jazz progressions. Well, the American Songbook is a resource for learning, standard harmony. Honestly, I think that for me, when I got my real book in 1974, right fresh off the Berkeley College presses, it opened up a whole new sort of way of thinking about chord progressions, most particularly functional harmony in 2/5s. But I've got 6 examples here of tunes that kind of span a bunch of decades. So we have a couple of modal tunes, blues tunes, tunes that use 2/5s, an Ellington tune. All these tunes are fundamental to understanding how not only jazz progressions work, but classical harmony and contemporary songwriting as well. So let's just dive into it. So I guess really the first thing to observe about jazz standards is in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, they arose out of improvising around songs. And the American Songbook sort of has 2 threads. One sort of exemplified by Irving Berlin that looks backwards to the harmonic language of Europe and the tonic dominant relationship. So this sound of G7 going to C is a really important sound. That basic sound gets sort of put into all kinds of music. And I can do 2/5s over and over again to sort of push me around into new keys. I wound up in D flat starting from C. Well, some of these songs are going to really show us examples of that. And then I guess maybe thinking about maybe George Gershwin, we suddenly began to feel the influence of Black American culture and the blues in standard American songbooks. And so we wind up with dominant chords being much more ambiguous and fun. And then it takes us into the modal stuff. And so let's kind of just have a little history lesson and look at how these things work together. I've got my 6 shorts from this week kind of go through this really, really quickly. We're going to pick our way through perhaps a little slower. All right, so our first tune is I Got Rhythm, I Got Rhythm. And it uses the harmonic highway. 1, 6, 2, 5. 3, 6, 2, 5. And I love this moment here. It goes to the 1 chord as a dominant chord over its 3rd, over the E, to F sharp diminished. And then most of the time you play like something like a C over G, to C, and back home again. Well, the harmonic highway is the circle of fifths within any diatonic scale system, and it sounds great. Sometimes we'll do that. I'll play F minor there instead of F sharp diminished. Well, in rhythm changes, there's a bridge, and the bridge is a circle of fifths, just dominant chords. Walk up to the 3 and make it a dominant chord, E7. So this dominant chord, E7, is the 5 of A, and so we're going to go to A7, right? You hear it? A is the 5 of D, so we're going to go to D, D7. And D7 is the 5 of G, which of course is the 5 of C. And we're back to where we started. Rhythm changes are the foundations for all these great Charlie Parker tunes and bebop standards in general. You'll find rhythm changes at the heart of, I don't know, I'm going to just go out on a limb and say thousands of tunes. Let's go on. Well, speaking of things that are on the foundation of thousands of tunes, how about the blues? Well, the blues is ordinarily just 1, 4, and 5. So if we're in F, 1, 4, and then back to 1. And then we go to 5, 4, back to 1. But the jazz blues uses 2 5s, like we saw in I Got Rhythm, to embellish those progressions. So very typical jazz blues, like that we do, again, we just to say Charlie Parker's name one more time, like that might be in Billy's Bounce or Au Prévov or something like that, uses these 2 5s to get home again. So we might start off with an F7 and then the 4-chord B flat 7. Actually, this is B flat 13 usually. Right, so tidy. Back to F, and that's an F9. Now, if I want to go to B flat for a couple of measures, I might want to do a 2 5 and push myself to B flat. So C minor 7, F7 takes me to B flat. And then just like in the rhythm changes, we go to the raised 4 diminished, B diminished, in this case, back to F. And since we're heading to a 2 5 to turn around, let's do a 2 5 to get to G minor. We're going to start a whole circle of 2 5s. A is the 2, D is the 5 of G minor. These are secondary dominants. G minor 7 is the 2, C is the 5 of F. Wow, so that was 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. And isn't that just the same 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 that we saw in I Got Rhythm? So a blues. Jazz blues. Let's go on. Autumn Leaves, a jazz standard, a popular song, European song originally from the French song, and it uses more of those circle of fifths within a key to generate a propulsion and a great sort of sense of harmony. Well, let's say we're in the key of G. This is very often done in the key of B flat. Key of G's relative minor is E minor, and the song does end in minor. B flat, key of B flat's relative minor is G minor. But just for the sake of argument, so you can see white keys instead, I'm going to do it in G. So the song begins on A minor 7, and it's like the 2 chord to D7 to G. And then it goes to the 4, C major 7. It's a beautiful sound, like just 2, 5, 1, and 4. So lovely. Now we're heading to E minor. So we're going to play the 2 5 of E minor. In this case, F sharp minor 7 flat 5 to B7 to E minor. And I'm playing that E minor with a major 7. Such a pretty sound. Right? So lovely. And that's really the first section of the tune. Now, the next thing that happens as we go on to the sort of B section of the tune, because there's no bridge exactly, is we're going to emphasize the minor. So we get a 2 5 to the minor right away. That's the F sharp B, E minor. And then, you know, just kind of invert what we did before. 2 5 to G, C major. And then the last sort of closing 8 bars, this lovely effect. We're back to the minor 2 5. And then this thing here, it's so much fun to play. E minor 7, D sharp, dominant. I mean, you could think of it as E flat dominant, D minor 7, and then we're going to continue on down to, it says, I don't know, it says C sharp. I guess I would think of that as, D flat. I think of these as flats because we're going down, right? E minor 7, E flat 7, D minor 7, D flat 7, and then another 2, 5, and home again to the E minor 1. Autumn Leaves, a kind of elegant tune that you can play as a fast tune or as a slow tune. You can play it because you can make all kinds of songs out of this. I hear this chord progression in so much stuff. Well, let's go on to a Duke Ellington song, one of my favorites. Well, I like to teach In a Sentimental Mood because it's got one of my favorite tricks, the chromatic descending line off the root. That was a D minor chord. And did you hear this happening? And if I did it with chords, D minor major 7, D minor 7, D minor 6. And the chord progression here goes to G minor. That B can become B flat, which is so pretty. And I might even continue to walk down and put a, A, 7 over A, and it takes me to back to D. That D becomes a dominant chord because we're going to apologize for all that minorness and play a 2, 5 and wind up in F. There's G minor 7, C 7, and we're going to wind up on F, but we won't stay there very long. Another turnaround, E to A, and we're home again to D. There's the G minor. Such a pretty melody. Well, In a Sentimental Mood in the A section winds up on F, but it doesn't stay there for the bridge. It does this beautiful modulation. F major becomes D flat major. It's this kind of lovely, kind of bright lift. Well, that D flat major then just kind of goes around the circle just as if we were playing I Got Rhythm. So D flat, B flat, E minor 7, A flat. These are just, honestly, we could play I Got Rhythm over those chord progressions, couldn't we? And then we're gonna say, okay, enough of that business. Let's head back to F, except we're not going back to F. We're going back to D minor. Life is worse than you thought. Wind up back at the bar. In a Sentimental Mood. You could learn all of Duke Ellington's tunes and it wouldn't hurt you one bit. Let's go on. My last two tunes are modal tunes. And of course, there's this enormous shift at a certain point in jazz history, and I think to some degree too in American popular music as we get into funk playing and sort of those single chord tunes begin to take over. The post-bop sound, the Blue Note post-bop sound, was full of these great modal things that really had some elements of blues, some elements of funk and rock. Cantaloupe Island is a great example of that. Of course, that's music theory, isn't it? And if you want to really understand your own music and your own impulses, having a certain amount of, I guess I would say, theoretical understanding, maybe historical, but also just personal. What is it that I like? What is it that I really connect to is crucial. And I hope that's what we're doing here on this channel. I hope this is music theory for everyone. Well, let's go on to Cantaloupe Island. So Cantaloupe Island has some terrific things about it, not the least of which is this great bass line against a right-hand part, which kind of does this. So this is F minor 7. There's the kind of B flat and D, and there's the 5th and the 7th against that. So this is so cool. melody pops in, and the melody is really pretty simple on blues tones. But what's great about learning this tune is what happens when he goes to the second line, to the D flat dominant sound. This pattern accommodates the D flat sound. The C becomes C flat. So this, and then the D becomes D flat. So this. So this, see the B flat and D? See the C and E flat becomes, and when you do this, you get the D flat 7. So F minor 7, D flat. Great. I love how, like, honestly, this is just the kind of thing I do. The figure, that little melody thing that we heard, readjusts to the new chord. Well, the third line of the tune is a D minor 11, a big stack of fourths. I very often play it like this with a D in the bass. A beautiful kind of sound, right? Right, just that sound there. That's a lovely voicing. And then it goes back to Herbie Hancock. And you could do worse than to learn a bunch of Herbie Hancock tunes as well. Great chord progressions here. Our last tune is a Miles Davis tune from 1959, So What? A tune so great that it gave a name to a certain kind of chord. So you probably have heard this before. Well, that's kind of what makes the So What tune. There really isn't anything kind of but that in a way. A bass does this. Maybe you double it with the piano. And then here's a chord that is called the So What chord. The melody tone, if we want to call it that, on the top, the B, a major third under that, and then fourths below that, perfect fourths. Now, as it happens, those two white key systems right next to each other both have the same structure. They're all set up in the same way. So major third on top, perfect fourths. If I go down one more white key, then a major third is a black key. You see where I'm going here? So they're not all that way. These are what my teacher would call chromatic voicings or chromatic couplings. Some people call this planing these days. I'm not a big fan of that term, but it is a beautiful sound, isn't it? So if you're learning So What, you get to learn how to do that. All white keys, not terribly hard. And then everything goes up a half step. Now we're in E flat. And you've got some black keys to deal with. The powerful thing about a coupling, and especially the So What coupling, is almost any melody sounds beautiful when coupled. Like, right? It's so pretty. So here we go. So elegant. Sounds great in strings or horns. It's just beautiful to do on the piano. Well, that was it. 6 great jazz standards. And you can play the standards and you don't have to be a jazz player to wring stuff out of them, right? They are looking both backwards at European history and forwards, incorporating the elements of the American sort of mixing pot of all these different cultures that we have here, and coming up with sort of new ways of expressing these things, integrating the old into the new, and really just kind of creating something really very special. What's going to happen in the future? Nobody knows, right? And yet, I think this basic foundation, the American songbook, jazz tunes that, kind of like really creatively incorporate elements of the past and the future together. Great way to study harmony. Great way to think about chords and ask yourself, what makes the chords that I play interesting to me? Well, I hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe and ding the bell to be notified when I do my videos. and I'll see you next time.